numbers on the screen glowed back at me, a beautiful, seven-figure testament to my freedom. My new company's first quarter earnings statement showed a net profit of over $1 million, all from clients who had followed me without a second thought. But to understand how I got this check, we have to go back to the beginning, to a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. For 5 years, my world was contained within the beige cubicle walls of Sterling Solutions. I wasn't just an account director. I was the architect of their most profitable client portfolio. I lived and breathed Sterling. My mornings started before sunrise, scanning international market news that might affect my clients in Europe. My evenings ended long after the cleaning crew had emptied the trash cans, with the blue light of my monitor painting tired shadows under my eyes as I put the finishing touches on one more proposal. I ate more sad desk lunches than I could count, and my personal life was a string of canceled plans and rain check texts. I was the one they sent in when a high-value account was on the brink of leaving. I was the one who could turn a hard no into a signed multi-year contract. I didn't just manage accounts, I nurtured them. I remembered the names of my clients, kids, sent them flowers when a parent was sick, and celebrated their personal victories as much as their professional ones. This wasn't just business, it was relationships. I had built a roster of clients worth over $1 million in annual billing, not for Sterling Solutions, but with them. It was a distinction my boss, Mr. Harrison, never seemed to grasp. Mr. Harrison was a man who wore his authority like an ill-fitting suit, obvious, a bit gaudy, and always making everyone else uncomfortable. He was the king of the hollow compliment, the master of taking credit with a paternalistic pat on the back. He saw my success not as my own achievement, but as a direct reflection of his brilliant management. I remember the day I closed the monolithic Apex Industries account, a deal everyone else in the company had written off as impossible. It took me 6 months of relentless, strategic work. I walked back to my desk that afternoon, exhausted, but buzzing with the thrill of the win. A few minutes later, Mr. Harrison swaggered over, his voice booming across the sales floor. "There she is, my star player," he announced, making sure everyone turned to look. I felt a familiar flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. "Hi, Mr. Harrison," I managed, trying to keep my voice even. "Just got off the phone with the CFO," he said, leaning against my cubicle wall. "He was singing your praises about Apex. Fantastic work. Absolutely fantastic." He paused, giving me a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "You know, you're the engine of this whole department. You make my job easy." There it was, that subtle shift. My win was his ease. My hard work was a convenience for him. "We're a great team, you and I," he continued, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "I find the talent, and you close the deals. A perfect system." He gave my shoulder a squeeze that was meant to be encouraging but felt possessive. "Keep making us look this good, kiddo. There's a pizza party in it for the whole team on Friday." He walked away, leaving the scent of his expensive, overpowering cologne in his wake. A pizza party for a deal that would net the company hundreds of thousands of dollars in its first year alone. I looked down at my screen, at the congratulatory emails already pouring in from the client, and felt a familiar, bitter taste in my mouth. I had built this entire portfolio, this $1 million book of business, on a foundation of personal sacrifice and genuine connection. And to him, it was just fuel for his corporate engine, an accomplishment that belonged to us and was worth a slice of pepperoni and some cheap soda. I didn't know it then, but that casual, dismissive praise was the beginning of the end. He was showing me exactly how much he truly valued me, and I was just too tired, too dedicated, to see it clearly. The email landed in my inbox like a summons, annual performance and compensation review. This was it. For weeks, I'd been running the numbers in my head. My portfolio had single-handedly driven the majority of the department's growth. The profits I'd generated weren't just good, they were record-breaking. A standard 10% commission on new business profit, which was floated around as the unofficial benchmark for top performers, would put my bonus well into the six-figure range. I'd earned it, I'd sacrificed my time, my health, and my personal life for it. This was the moment the company, and Mr. Harrison, would finally have to acknowledge my value in the only language they truly understood. money. I walked into his office, feeling a nervous flutter of excitement. He was leaning back in his leather chair, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. "Ah, come in, sit down," he gestured grandly. "Let's talk about your phenomenal year." He spent 5 minutes reciting my own accomplishments back to me, framing them as a victory for his leadership. He praised my work on the Apex account, my client retention rates, my unflagging dedication. It was the same old song and dance, but today I didn't care. I was waiting for the crescendo. "We value that kind of dedication here at Sterling," he said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany of his desk, "and we believe in rewarding it." I picked it up, my eyes scanned past the boilerplate HR text to the bottom line. It was my annual bonus statement. The number printed in bold, stark black ink was $5,000. I blinked, certain I was misreading it. $5,000. It wasn't even enough to cover the taxes on the bonus I was expecting. I could feel the blood drain from my face. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "There must be a mistake. Is this a typo?" Mr. Harrison's smile tightened. "A typo? No, that's correct. A $5,000 discretionary bonus. Very generous, I think you'll find." I stared at him, the room suddenly feeling very small and very cold. "Generous? Mr. Harrison, my portfolio generated over $1 million in profit this year. This is less than 0.5%. The Apex deal alone." He held up a hand, cutting me off. His paternalistic warmth evaporated, replaced by an icy condescension. "Let's be clear," he said, leaning forward. "You are a salaried employee. You get paid a salary to do a job. This company provides you with a desk, a phone, a brand name, and the entire infrastructure that allows you to do that job. The profits belong to the company. But the relationships," I stammered, my mind reeling. "The clients are with Sterling because of me. I built that entire book of business." He laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was sharp and dismissive. "You built it? You're an employee, a functionary. You think those clients would have even taken your call if you weren't calling from a Sterling Solutions phone number? You're a good little worker bee, I'll give you that. But the hive gets the honey." The injustice of it was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. All those late nights, all those canceled plans, all that genuine care I had poured into my work. He was reducing it all to nothing more than the function of a replaceable cog in his machine. I was expecting something that reflected my contribution to the bottom line. I said, my voice shaking with a rage I could no longer contain. "A standard commission would be over $100,000. That's when the mask didn't just slip. He ripped it off and threw it on the floor. He stood up, his face reddening. $100,000? He spat the words like they were poison. For what? For remembering a client's kid's birthday? For schmoozing on the phone? You get a salary for that? You think you're entitled to a massive cut of the profits just for doing your job? You think you deserve that kind of money?" He leaned over the desk, his voice dropping to a venomous growl. "Let me be perfectly clear. You don't deserve it. The company deserves it. I deserve it, for having the foresight to build this department and hire you in the first place. You are a tool that I use to get the job done. A very effective tool, but a tool nonetheless." I just sat there, stunned into silence. I bet some of you listening have had a moment like that. A moment of such shocking clarity that it feels like the world just stops turning. If you know that feeling, and you're not already subscribed, you might want to stick around to see what happened next. He saw the fight drain out of me and straightened his tie, his composure returning. "We're done here," he said, his tone final. "I have another meeting." I stood up on unsteady legs, the bonus statement still clutched in my hand. It felt like a piece of garbage. I walked out of his office without another word, the scent of his expensive, overpowering cologne once again choking the air. But this time, it didn't just smell like arrogance. It smelled like theft. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, the numbers on my screen blurring into meaningless shapes. The anger that had flared in his office cooled into something harder and more focused. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He had misjudged me. I wasn't just a good little worker bee. I was a strategist. This negotiation wasn't over. It had just begun. I went home and didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the night preparing my case, channeling all my fury into cold, hard logic. I researched industry-standard commission structures for my role in our specific market. I printed out my own performance metrics, highlighting the direct correlation between my efforts and the company's profit surge. I even pulled up my original employment contract, searching for any clause, any ambiguous phrase I could leverage. I was going to give him one last chance to be reasonable, to approach this not as a boss dressing down an employee, but as two professionals discussing the terms of a highly profitable business relationship. The next morning, I intercepted him near the coffee machine, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice impressively steady. "I know you're busy, but could I have 5 minutes to follow up on our conversation yesterday? I've put together some data I think you'll find relevant." He looked surprised, then an amused smirk played on his lips. "Data? All right, my office in 10. I walked in and laid 3 neatly printed pages on his desk. "I took your feedback seriously," I began, keeping my tone respectful but firm. "I understand the company's position on salaried employees. However, my contribution has significantly exceeded the standard expectations for my role. As you can see here, I pointed to the first page. A commission of 8 to 12% on new business profit is standard for top performers in our sector. Given the $1 million in profit I generated, even the most conservative interpretation would put my performance bonus in the high 5 figures." I moved to the next page. "This is about talent retention. I am deeply loyal to Sterling, but a bonus of this size is demoralizing. It sends a message that extraordinary performance is not valued in a tangible way. It creates a flight risk, not just for me, but for anyone else who might be watching." I was appealing to his business sense, to his role as a manager. He picked up the pages, his eyes scanning them with theatrical slowness. He didn't look at my employment contract. He didn't need to. He just looked at my carefully compiled research, a condescending smile growing on his face. Then he laughed. It wasn't a loud, booming laugh. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh, full of derision and contempt. It was the sound of a king chuckling at a peasant's petition. "Oh, this is precious," he said, dropping the papers onto his desk as if they were contaminated. "You really did your homework. You made charts." He leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers behind his head. "Let me save you any future late nights you might spend on arts and crafts. I don't give a damn about industry standards. We're Sterling Solutions. We don't follow standards. We set them. And the standard I'm setting is that the company keeps the money." He leaned forward again, his smile gone. "And talent retention? You think you're holding me hostage? You think I'm worried you'll leave?" He laughed that ugly laugh again. "Let me tell you something. For your salary, I can get 2 recent college grads who will work twice as hard just for the chance to have Sterling Solutions on their resume. They'll be grateful for a pizza party. You are not irreplaceable. You are a line item on a budget, and you are easily replaced." My carefully constructed arguments, my logic, my professionalism, it all turned to dust in my mouth. "So no," he said, his voice dropping to that familiar, venomous tone. "We will not be revisiting your bonus. You will take your $5,000, and you will say thank you. Or you can walk. It makes no difference to me. The hive will keep making honey long after one little bee buzzes off." He gestured to the door. "We're done?" I walked out. I don't remember the journey back to my desk. All I could feel was a profound, bottomless humiliation. I sat down in my chair, the beige walls of my cubicle suddenly feeling like they were closing in, squeezing the air from my lungs. This was it. This was my low point. I had poured my soul into this job, into these clients, into this company. I had followed all the rules. I had worked harder, been smarter, cared more. I had appealed to his ego, then to his logic. I had tried to play the game, and he had just told me, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't even a player. I was a piece on the board, and he could sweep me off it whenever he felt like it. I looked at the phone on my desk, the very instrument he said I was nothing without. I thought of my clients. Apex Industries, Omnicorp, the dozens of others. He thought they belonged to Sterling Solutions. He thought they were his. A cold, terrifying thought began to form in the pit of my stomach. An idea so audacious it made me feel dizzy. He said I was a tool he had used to get the job done. Maybe he was right. But the thing about a tool is that it can be used for more than one purpose. I sat there, paralyzed, the echo of his words easily replaced, reverberating in the hollow space he'd carved out inside my chest. He was right. I was just a line item, a functionary, a tool. The beige cubicle walls, once just a bland backdrop to my life, now felt like the padded interior of a cell. My career, my future, my entire professional identity, it was all contained in this 6-by-6-foot box, and he held the only key. I had done everything right, and it had led me to this dead end. My gaze drifted to the framed photos on my desk. There was one of me with the marketing team from Apex Industries at a charity golf tournament. There was a silly selfie with the CEO of Omnicorp, taken after we closed a deal over lunch. These weren't just clients. They were people. People I had worked with, laughed with, and built something with. He said they wouldn't have taken my call if it wasn't from a Sterling Solutions phone. He thought the brand was the asset. But he was wrong. The relationships were the asset. I was the asset. And that audacious thought from before, the one that had felt so terrifying, now returned with a cold, sharp clarity. He said I was a tool he had used to get the job done. Maybe he was right. But the thing about a tool is that it can be used for more than one purpose. A jolt, like an electric shock, shot through me. The fog of humiliation began to burn away, replaced by the white-hot flame of an idea. I wasn't a piece on the board. I was a player who had been tricked into thinking she was a pawn. The game wasn't over. I had just been playing by the wrong rules. His rules. It was time to find my own. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I navigated through the company's HR portal, past the cheerful stock photos of diverse, smiling teams, and into the dusty digital archives where my own history was stored. I found the file, _employment_agreement_signed_May 14th, 2018.pdf, my original contract. I had glanced at it the night before, searching for leverage for my bonus. I was looking for what was in it. Now I was looking for what wasn't. I clicked it open. The familiar, dense blocks of legalese filled my screen. I scrolled past the initial sections. Position, duties and responsibilities, base salary. My eyes scanned faster. My breath held tight in my chest. I was looking for the cage. Every modern employment contract for a role like mine had one. It was standard, boilerplate, the corporate equivalent of iron bars, the section on restrictive covenants. My eyes darted across the text, searching for the keywords that had ended the ambitions of so many others: non-compete, non-solicitation, non-interference. I scrolled down. Section 7, confidentiality. That was standard. I couldn't take their trade secrets or proprietary software. Fine, I didn't want their junk. I wanted my portfolio. Section 8, termination. It detailed the conditions under which I could be fired or resign. Nothing about what happened after. Section 9, governing law. I reached the end of the document. My signature, a hopeful, naive swirl of ink from 5 years ago, stared back at me. I scrolled back up. Slower this time. I read every single word. I used the search function. Compete, 0 results. Solicit, 0 results. Interfere, 0 results. It wasn't there. There was no non-compete clause. There was no non-solicitation clause. There was absolutely nothing in the contract I had signed that legally prevented me from resigning, starting my own firm, and contacting every single one of my clients the very next day. It was an oversight of such monumental, breathtaking arrogance that I almost laughed out loud. In his smug certainty that Sterling Solutions was the prize, that I was a grateful worker bee who would never dream of leaving the hive, Mr. Harrison, or the company's lazy, overpaid lawyers, had failed to lock the gate. They had built a $1 million asset, handed me the keys, and never bothered to ask for them back. He had called me a tool. He was right. A tool is something you use to build. I looked at my phone. I looked at my email. I looked at the $1 million book of business that I had built from scratch. He thought it was his. He thought the hive gets the honey. A slow smile spread across my face. The humiliation was gone. The despair was gone. All that was left was a pure, crystalline sense of purpose. He was about to learn a very expensive lesson. This little bee wasn't just buzzing off. I was going to take the entire garden with me. The plan wasn't just a thought anymore. It was a blueprint. The rage that had threatened to consume me was gone, replaced by a chilling, methodical calm. I was no longer a victim trapped in a collapsing world. I was an architect, and I was about to draw up a new one. The first order of business was to play the part he had assigned me. The next morning, I walked into the office a different woman, though no one could see it. I was the very picture of a defeated employee. My shoulders were slumped, my eyes were fixed on the floor, and the confident stride that usually carried me through the halls was replaced by a quiet, shuffling gait. I avoided the coffee machine, heading straight for the perceived safety of my beige cell. When Mr. Harrison passed my desk, he gave me a smug, satisfied nod, the kind a dog owner gives a newly obedient pet. I didn't look up. I spent the day in a state of meticulous, calculated compliance. I answered emails with terse professionalism. I updated my project trackers. I sent an email to HR. Please process my annual bonus, thank you. I was the perfect little worker bee, broken and put back in her place. I could feel his eyes on me throughout the day, his arrogance radiating across the office. He thought he was watching a spirit crumble. He was actually watching a fortress being built. My real work began after I got home. The nights that had once belonged to Sterling Solutions were now mine. My personal laptop, once a device for mindless scrolling and forgotten streaming service subscriptions, became my command center. My first move wasn't setting up a company. It was confirming my freedom. I found a corporate lawyer online who offered 30-minute consultations. The next day, on my lunch break, I sat in my car in the parking garage and took the video call. I shared my screen, showing him the employment agreement. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 50s. He read it in silence, his expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up at me from his screen. "They never had you sign a non-compete or a non-solicitation agreement?" he asked, a note of genuine disbelief in his voice. "No," I said, my heart hammering. "Is it enforceable?" He let out a short, dry laugh. "There's nothing to enforce. They were sloppy, arrogant probably. Assumed their name was enough to keep you in line." He leaned forward. "Let me be perfectly clear. As long as you don't take any proprietary company data, client lists from their server, internal strategy documents, that sort of thing, you are legally free to resign, start a competing business, and call every single client you've ever worked with." They left the door wide open. The validation was a wave of pure, unadulterated relief. I ended the call, paid his invoice, and felt the last anchor of doubt fall away. That night, I registered an LLC. I called it Nexus Point Consulting. Sterling was a brand. Nexus was a connection. It was the entire point he had missed. I filled out the online forms, typing my own name into the box labeled Chief Executive Officer. I set up a business bank account, designed a simple, elegant logo, and secured a domain name. By midnight on Tuesday, my new company was no longer an idea. It was a legal entity, waiting to be brought to life. The rest of the week was a blur of clandestine preparation. I couldn't download my client list from the Sterling CRM, but I didn't need to. I had spent 5 years building real relationships. I had their direct lines and personal email addresses in my own phone, saved from years of just-in-case weekend calls and after-hours problem-solving. At my kitchen table, I drafted the email. It was a masterpiece of professional diplomacy. It didn't mention Sterling by name or breathe a word of my grievances. It simply announced the launch of my new, specialized consultancy, focused on providing the same dedicated personal partnership they had come to value. It ended with a simple, powerful offer, an invitation to a seamless transition with no disruption to their business. I saved it as a draft, the recipient line ominously blank. On Friday, the smell of cheap cheese and pepperoni wafted through the office. The pizza party. Mr. Harrison strutted around, the benevolent king dispensing cardboard-crusted rewards to his loyal subjects. He eventually made his way to my cubicle, a paper plate in hand. "There she is," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Working hard. I like to see that." He leaned against the wall, taking a loud bite of pizza. "Glad you decided to stick around. See, we take care of our people. Some people just aren't cut out for the big leagues on their own. They need the hive." This was it, the final, gloating jab. He was so sure of his victory, so convinced of my weakness. I slowly looked up from my monitor, my face a carefully constructed mask of weary submission. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile he would see in his nightmares for years to come, though he didn't know it yet. "Thank you for the pizza, Mr. Harrison," I said softly. He chuckled, patting my cubicle wall as if I were part of the furniture. "That's the spirit." He walked away, swaggering back to the party, leaving me in the shadow of his colossal ego. I turned back to my screen. There it was. The drafted email, the list of contacts in my phone, the keys to the kingdom he never knew he'd given me. The hive was about to get a lot smaller. I clicked on the calendar icon and scheduled a meeting with him for Monday morning at 9 a.m. The subject line had only one word: resignation. The weekend was a ghost of a memory, a 2-day breath held before the plunge. I walked into the office on Monday morning, and the air itself seemed to notice the difference. My shoulders were back, my head was high. I was no longer the shuffling, defeated creature from the week before. I was a hunter, and I was walking into the lion's den not to be eaten, but to collect my kill. Mr. Harrison was on the phone when I reached his glass-walled office, laughing loudly at something the person on the other end had said. He saw me, held up a finger, and finished his call with a booming, "You got it, talk soon." He hung up and gestured me in, a wide, self-satisfied grin plastered on his face. "So, the prodigal employee returns. Decided you like getting a paycheck after all, eh?" I didn't smile. I walked to his desk, the polished mahogany that had once felt like an altar of judgment, and placed a single, folded piece of paper on its surface. "This is my 2-week notice of resignation," I said, my voice as cool and steady as a frozen lake. He blinked, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before it returned, sharper and more condescending than before. He leaned back, not even bothering to pick up the letter. Well, took you long enough. I have to say, I'm not surprised. Some people just can't handle the pressure. It's for the best. We'll find someone hungrier." "I'm sure you will," I agreed, my calmness seeming to unnerve him more than any argument would have. "I just wanted to make you aware of my next steps for the sake of a professional transition." He scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Next steps? Your next step is to pack up your desk. What else is there?" This was the moment, the precipice. I let a beat of silence hang in the air, savoring it. This morning, I officially launched my own consultancy firm, Nexus Point Consulting. I said, "I will be spending the remainder of my day contacting my clients to inform them of my new venture and to offer them a seamless transition of their accounts to my new company." He stared at me, then he threw his head back and laughed. It was that same ugly, barking laugh from before, filled with derision. "You'll what? Are you insane? You can't do that. We have a non-solicitation agreement, a non-compete. I will have our lawyers bury you so deep you'll never work in this city again. We will sue you into the Stone Age." I didn't flinch. I simply tilted my head. "What non-solicitation agreement, Mr. Harrison?" The question stopped his laughter cold. "What are you talking about? Your employment contract." "The one you signed," he sputtered, his face starting to flush with angry color. "I had my lawyer review my employment contract on Friday," I said, my voice dropping to a quiet, lethal tone. "The one I signed 5 years ago, when the company was apparently so confident in its own brand that it didn't feel the need to include any restrictive covenants. There is no non-compete clause. There is no non-solicitation clause. There is nothing legally preventing me from doing exactly what I just said I'm going to do." The color drained from his face. I could see the mental calculation whirring behind his eyes, the frantic search through his memory. He saw the truth. He saw the gaping $1,000,000 hole their arrogance had left in their legal armor. The bravado, the condescension, the king of the castle persona, it all shattered at once, like a dropped mirror. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, that's not possible." He fumbled with his keyboard, his hands shaking as he tried to pull up the HR files. "The client lists, they're company property. You can't take them." "I don't need your lists," I said softly. "You called me a tool for schmoozing. You said I was just paid to remember a client's kid's birthday. You were right. I remember all of their birthdays. I also remember their private cell numbers, their wives, names, and the fact that they despise their corporate procurement software. I don't have a list, Mr. Harrison. I have relationships, the ones you told me were worthless." He was breathing heavily now, his eyes wide with a dawning animal panic. He looked like a man watching his house burn to the ground. "You can't Apex Omnicorp, that's millions of dollars." "It's over $1 million in annual profit, actually," I corrected him gently. "My profit, the honey you were so sure the hive would keep." I pulled out my phone. His eyes locked onto it as if it were a loaded gun. "I've already drafted the emails," I said, my thumb hovering over the screen. "I just wanted to have this conversation with you first, face to face." I unlocked the screen and opened my outbox. The first one goes to the CFO at Apex Industries. "I think I'll hit send right now." "Wait," he choked out, lurching forward in his chair. It was a desperate, pathetic sound. I didn't wait. I pressed send. A faint swoosh sound echoed in the silent room. "We're done here," I said, turning for the door. I used his own words against him, twisting the knife. I walked out of his office, leaving him staring at his screen, his empire crumbling around him. I didn't look back, but I could hear the frantic, panicked mashing of buttons on his desk phone as he tried to stop the avalanche he himself had started. The scent of his expensive cologne still hung in the air, but for the first time, it smelled like fear. I didn't even make it back to my desk. The sound of his frantic, fumbling attempts to dial his phone was followed by a scrape of his chair, and then my name. He didn't shout it, he choked on it. "Wait!" I stopped but didn't turn around. I heard his frantic, heavy footsteps on the corporate-grade carpet. He came around to face me, blocking my path. The arrogant king of the castle was gone. In his place was a pale, sweating man with panic fluttering in his eyes. His expensive suit suddenly looked 2 sizes too big for him. Let's go back to the office," he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. He gestured vaguely with a trembling hand. "We can be reasonable. We can discuss this." "No," I said, my voice calm and even. The entire sales floor had gone quiet. Every head that was visible over the cubicle walls was turned in our direction. "I wanted them to see this. We can discuss it right here." His eyes darted around, noticing the audience. A flush of red crept back into his neck. "Please," he begged, lowering his voice further. "Just recall the email. Tell them it was a mistake. What will it take? What do you want?" I almost smiled. It was the question I had been dreaming of. "What do I want?" I repeated, letting the question hang in the air between us. "Last week, I wanted a bonus that reflected my contribution. I wanted respect. You made it very clear I deserved neither." "I was wrong," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "I misspoke. You're a vital member of this team. A star player. You were right about the commission. 100,000. I'll have it wired to you today. Just stop, please." I let out a short, soft laugh, devoid of any humor. It was the same sound he had made when he'd looked at my research, and I watched him flinch as he recognized it. $100,000? I said, shaking my head slowly. "Oh, Mr. Harrison, that was the price for my loyalty. That was the price to keep me as your good little worker bee. The price to fix the mess you've just made is substantially higher." He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. "What are you talking about?" "This isn't about a bonus anymore," I said, taking a small step closer, forcing him to hold my gaze. "This is about damages. You threatened to bury me in a lawsuit. You belittled my work. You told me I was easily replaced. You were wrong on all counts. So now, we're going to have a new conversation. This is my severance negotiation." He was breathing through his mouth now, short, shallow puffs of air. "Severance? You're not being terminated." "I'm terminating you," I corrected him, "as my employer. And there's a price for the transition. You can pay me to walk away quietly, or you can watch as I dismantle the entire department, client by client. Your choice." What is the price?" he whispered, defeated. I held up my phone, the screen still glowing. Right now, only Apex Industries knows about Nexus Point Consulting. Omnicorp is next on my list, then Valor Financial, then every other name in the portfolio that you thought belonged to you. Every minute we stand here talking, the value of what you're trying to save is plummeting. I looked him dead in the eye, the power move, the final non-negotiable term. $250,000, I said, the number landing in the silent office like a grenade. "You will have a certified check cut and delivered to my desk by 5 o'clock today. The paperwork will classify it as a severance payment, and it will be drafted by my lawyer, not yours. I'll send you his contact information." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. $250,000? That's extortion. That's insane. "No," I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. "It's a bargain. The contract has spoken, Mr. Harrison. The time for discussion is over. Now we only discuss the settlement. You pay me my price, and maybe I'll consider a phased, orderly transition of the few accounts that aren't a good fit for my new firm. You don't pay me, and I will burn this entire portfolio to the ground by morning. I will make sure the damages from the client lawsuits for breach of service cost you 10 times that amount." I gave him one last look, letting him see the absolute certainty in my eyes. There was no bluff. We both knew it. $250,000, I repeated. "By 5 o'clock. Don't be late. The price goes up at 5:01. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the office. I could feel every eye on me, but for the first time, I didn't care. I walked back to my desk, sat down in my chair, and pulled up the contact information for the CEO of Omnicorp. I had a few hours to kill. The clock on my computer screen ticked to 4:58 p.m. The office was a tomb. Most of my colleagues had already scurried away, not wanting to be anywhere near the blast radius. I hadn't touched my phone since the morning. I didn't need to. The ball was in his court. I sat there, perfectly still, my resignation letter sitting neatly on the corner of my desk next to my packed-up box of personal effects. It was the most expensive silence I had ever experienced. At 4:59, he appeared. He looked like a man who had been through a war and lost. His tie was loose, his hair was disheveled, and the arrogant swagger was replaced by the slow, heavy tread of a man walking to his own execution. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to my desk, his eyes fixed on a point on the wall just behind my head. He was holding a long, cream-colored envelope. Without a word, he placed it on my desk. I picked it up. It was heavy. I tore it open and slid out the contents. It wasn't a company check. It was a certified bank check. His name wasn't on it. The bank's was. He had been forced to go through the humiliating process of securing the funds personally. The amount was printed in crisp, unforgiving numbers. $250,000. He had met my price. I folded the check, slid it into my purse, and stood up. I finally met his gaze. There was nothing there. No anger, no fight. Just a hollow, echoing emptiness. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice neutral. "It was a pleasure doing business with you." He just stood there as I picked up my box and walked away from the beige cubicle for the last time. I never saw him again. I heard through the grapevine what happened next. My departure created a firestorm. Apex Industries and Omnicorp left within the week, following me to Nexus Point. Their exit spooked the other major accounts. Some came with me, but others, unnerved by the chaos, simply terminated their contracts and went to other competitors. Within 6 months, the $1 million portfolio I had built was gone. The department's profits cratered. The hive, as he called it, had collapsed. Mr. Harrison was fired for gross mismanagement of key personnel and assets. He was a line item on a budget, and he was easily replaced. And me? That check for $250,000 wasn't the prize. It was the severance. It was the seed. It was the war chest that allowed me to build my company without needing outside funding, to operate from a position of strength from day one. Which brings me back to here. To now, I'm sitting in my office. The wall in front of me is floor-to-ceiling glass, with a view of the city skyline that still takes my breath away. There are no beige walls, no sad desk lunches. The numbers on the screen in front of me aren't a bonus statement I have to beg for. They're my company's first quarter earnings. That 7-figure number isn't just profit. It's proof. It's the final word in an argument I had with a man who thought I was worthless. He said I didn't deserve that kind of money. He was right. I deserved more. That moment in his office, when he told me I was nothing but a tool, it could have been the end. But it turned out to be the beginning. It was a moment of shocking clarity that showed me the game was rigged. So, I stopped playing. My story isn't about revenge. It's about recognizing your own value when no one else will. It's about realizing that sometimes the only way to win is to walk away and build your own game. If you've ever had a moment like that, and you want to hear more stories about flipping the board instead of just playing the pieces, then I think you'll want to stick around.